He's a man that has seen it all.
I had a confrontation with the National Assembly once.
Very passionate about issues that affect society.
A senator asked me, "Are you tired of your job?" And I said to him, "My name is Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi, not CBN government."
I just want to know a little bit about your antecedents, your birth. When you were born, what were those things that affected you growing up?
I was born in Kano, 1961. I was born into the Kano royal family. My grandfather, the Emir Muhammad Sanusi, was the 11th Fulani Emir of Kano. He named me after himself, and he abdicated the throne in 1963 when I was barely 2 years old. Spent my early years in Lagos. My father was then here in Lagos in the Prime Minister's office as Director of Research, basically doing the intelligence work from the Ministry of External Affairs. On my mother's side, my mother comes from a long line of religious scholars, and they're all either imams or qadis, okay, Sharia court judges, so from background of scholarship.
Assalamu alaikum. Ina wa fasarki fatan alheri. Allah ya kawo shi wannan lokacin. Allah ya ƙara masa imani. Allah ya taimaka masa. Allah ya sa lokacin mu ya zo mu kuma Allah ya sa mu cika da imani. Mun yi wa Allah godiya da mu ma Allah ya nuna mana wannan rana. Allah ya datar da mu. Allah ya sa mu dace. Ya ƙara wa sarki imani da lafiya.
When my father was going abroad, at that time, my parents had separated. There was this big decision he had to make, which was whether to take me with him or leave me in Nigeria. And members of his family were generally concerned about a prince being taken out to Europe, where he might grow up and not learn about his religion, not learn about Islam, not be able to read the Quran, and be totally disconnected from his culture. So he took the difficult decision to leave his children in Nigeria. And I went to one of his uncles, Alhaji Muhammad Inouada, who was then Minister of Defense. So I was there until 1966 when the coup happened, and the Wada family moved to Kano, we moved to Kano. And shortly after that, I was enrolled at St. Anne's Primary School, which is a Catholic primary school in Kaduna, at the age of 8, boarding school, from where I went on to King's College, and then ABU. So I've been shaped by so many influences. The fortune of having these influences, my father, Alhaji Nouada, the Emir of Kano, and my mother's family growing up. I have learned the importance of the extended family. A lot of these subtle influences have influenced my life. They've influenced my thoughts, influenced my attitude towards friendship. Being in St. Anne's and King's College has shaped my worldview around the country, around ethnicity, around religion, around merit. So many of the core ideas that I think have defined me in my professional life were acquired from those early years in my life.
Real quickly, I just want to focus quickly on your family now. Tell me a little bit about your family.
It's a very traditional family. I have 4 wives. And the first 2 were related to me, one on my father's side, one on my mother's side. The third is a friend, a lawyer. The fourth, a princess from a family that's close to my family. My children, I've been blessed with 13 children, 8 of whom are girls. One of them is a baby. Like my father, my principal focus with all of them has been to say, go get educated. You know, and they know that that's the most important thing. I've brought my children to understand that they cannot just see themselves as, oh, I'm the son of the governor of Central Bank, I'm the son of an MA. It's you're nothing. You know, you go and be something. My first son decided on graduation. He had read accounting at Buckingham. He decided he wanted to join the police. I was surprised. So he's an ASP in the police, but he's going in September to Leicester to do a master's in police studies. For the girls, the older ones have all gone through their master's degrees. Some are married. I'm a grandfather now. 2 of my daughters are married, and my son, and they've all got children. Alhamdulillah. The younger ones are coming up. I have. So this year, I'll be in the UK doing a PhD. But 6 of my children will be in the UK. Okay, I have 2 completing a master's, 1 completing a bachelor's degree, all in this year. And I've got 1 in A-levels, and 2 would be undergraduate. So basically, that's my life.
So the whole family is in school?
Yeah, that's everybody's in school. And one of the reasons I'm doing the PhD is also to let them know that they've got no excuse. If I at 60 am going to start the PhD, all of you had better start applying.
That's amazing. Starting a PhD at 60.
Yeah. My father was always rather different from me. I mean, he was a prince. He was the crown prince of Kano. He was Chiroma. But he grew up more or less without an interest in being an emir. He never really, even though he had the title of Chiroma of Kano, he never really had an interest or an ambition to be the emir. Now, he knew that I had an interest in it, and he never stopped me, but he always said to me, you can't sit, you don't put it in your head. First of all, you can't guarantee that you'll be there. Secondly, you can't just sit waiting for somebody to die for you, yeah? So in the interim, you've got to go and do something. And he said to me, focus on your education, focus on a career, be something. What I would like is that you do not end up as the son of Ambassador Sanusi. I would like you to be something in your own right. So I remember when I became CEO of First Bank, when I became governor of Central Bank, I said, alhamdulillah, this is what my father wanted for me. People talk to me as a chief executive, as the first northern Nigerian chief executive of First Bank. So I was the governor of Central Bank, and later as emir of Kano. So you've risen above being the son of ABC. So, even though we're proud of what they did, they're giants, we rode on their shoulders, we would not be here without them. But the idea was break away from this sense that I am the son of this person. I was born into this family. It's nothing. And I've seen too many of my relatives, too many of my cousins and princes who are nothing other than that they were born to this emir or born to this. And if you take that away from them, they're nothing. In 2012, as governor of Central Bank, I got the Bankers Committee to declare that year the Year of the Woman in Banking. And we issued a number of guidelines. Among them were that the banks would strive in every recruitment exercise to ensure that at least 50% of those that they recruited were women. That banks would actively seek to promote at least 40% of management positions to be held by women, and that banks would try to have at least 30% of board positions held by women. The central bank was established in 1959. I became governor in 2009. In 50 years, only 4 women had made director in the central bank. I appointed 8 female directors in 1 year. We basically took areas where men had dominated and monopolized and put women there. And those women proved that they could do this job as well and even better than the men. And we empowered them. I hold the view that women issues, gender issues in Nigeria go beyond these elite issues of women directors at CBN or directors on banks or bank MDs. You realize that the vulnerability of women is a matter that needs to be put front and center of political discourse. I was sitting receiving these reports, and there were all these women who were waiting, and I heard a very loud scream. So I asked them to go and check, and the person who checked came back with tears in his eyes. And what had happened? A woman who had just walked across, there's a children's hospital about 200 meters away from the palace, just across, and her child was sick, and she had come to ask for money to go and buy the drugs. And while she was waiting for her turn to ask for support, the baby died in her arms. And how much was this? It was less than $5. This is what happens every day in this country. Children die because their parents cannot afford $5. So, that a mother will watch her child die because she does not have $5.
Let me quickly segue into this. Girl-child education, you've always been passionate about now. And then let's segue that into what you're doing with girl-child, your SDG goals, and 1 million teachers. I mean, you had a great session with the president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, and there was another thing. He didn't just join. He stayed till the end, critiqued every project. They had finalists, you know. You will be advocating for some funding for that. I mean, how does that make you feel?
I mean, look, the Ghanaian president is wonderful, and the Prime Minister of Norway, and they're the co-chairs of the SDG advocates, and they have shown extremely profound leadership. And you've got others. You've got Jeffrey Sachs, who goes out, you know, and basically tells multinationals and governments in Europe the truth about what they're doing and how they have been part and parcel of the problems of underdevelopment historically, and a number of colleagues, as you saw on that platform, you know, young people who have been chosen by the UN Secretary General to be advocates for SDGs, and I've been focused on SDG 4, which is education, largely girl-child education, SDG 5, which is gender equality, and SDG 8, which is about decent work. And this challenge was about teachers. Teachers who are actually involved in dealing with poor people in their communities. Show us what you are doing that provides education, that can get education to underserved populations. And so you've got simple ideas like people who are working on prisons, for example, to get people out. You've got people who are working on technical skills. You've got people who have, it's like the reader room, which is basically a mobile library that can be moved to a village, and then children can be taught how to read, how to calculate, and so on. Now, when we have a proof of concept, then hopefully we can invite the governments, we can invite UNICEF, we can invite other people to come and say, this is a proof that this idea works. Simple ideas from the teachers themselves who engage, who work with children. You've got someone who's run a dyslexia center. I mean, dyslexics are totally ignored in our country. Yes. Okay, so you know, so basically, there's a complex populations, underserved populations. You know, we try to reach them.
I'll segue this conversation into your book. So obviously, your book is a collection of writings over the years. What was the mind behind writing that book?
First of all, I never set out to write a book. Okay, these were a collection of articles and started as debates. After I came back from my studies in the Sudan, this was at the height of the problems with General Abacha. The fact that Nigerians were tired of military rule, the fact that he had set up these political parties and he was determined to self-perpetuate. And if you picked any newspaper in Nigeria, the so-called Hausa Fulani were the evil people. They were the ones who were responsible for the destruction of Nigeria and so on. And it disturbed many of us, especially northern progressives. And we had a meeting once in my house in Kano, and we had Kabir Yusuf, who was the first editor and owner of the Weekly Trust and later Daily Trust. So Kabir Yusuf said, you know, I want to start a newspaper, but for the newspaper to really be effective, you guys have to write. Writing that expressed an opposition to dictatorship, support for democracy and progressive ideas from Northerners. For example, I was opposed to the annulment of June 12th. I was on the board of the Kudirat Initiative for Nigerian Democracy. So for me, this was how being a regular columnist started. Basically a passion to express a view and to serve as a corrective to what I saw as a very unfair narrative. That was how it started. Then we went through 1998 and then the run-up to the 1999 elections, and of course it was inescapable that there will be conversations around politics, around zoning, around whether the president should go to the north or south. I was, of course, firmly opposed to any idea that simply changing where the president was from was going to change anything. My view was always, the president, don't start asking where he's from. Ask what he can deliver. Ask who he is, what is his background, what is his vision. So we got into those debates in the run-up to democracy. And then after democracy, there was this big thing about the Sharia movement. The Sharia movement was, for me, ultimately political. And I believe in 1999, what happened with Obasanjo coming to power was that the northern Muslim political elite found itself for the first time completely out of it. They didn't have the economy, they didn't have the military, they didn't have the government. And I think the entire Sharia thing was basically taking advantage. I mean, it's Karl Popper. You feel a sense of insecurity, and then you create an identity, and it becomes part of the negotiation for political space. And so Zamfara decided to declare Sharia. And what was really declaration of Sharia? In actual fact, it was nothing. It was just amending the Northern Nigerian Penal Code to introduce certain criminal punishments that had been taken out by the British. The Northern Nigerian Penal Code was always based on Islamic law. Many people don't know that. The Northern Nigerian Penal Code was brought by the British from the Sudan. And the Sudanese code and the Indian Muslim code were based on the Turkish Mujalla from the Ottoman Empire, just amended to reflect Maliki law and not Hanafi law. So the Northern Nigerian Penal Code was always Sharia law. And the danger I saw from the very beginning was the elevation of religion to the major element in political discourse diverted attention of people from the real issues of development. So governors who were supposed to provide development basically did not. Plus, many of the things that happened were actually a violation of Islamic law. And because I had a degree in Islamic law, I knew. And that's why I got involved in those debates. I criticized the amputation of the hand of a thief in Zamfara. I criticized the sentencing of women to death for adultery. And not because you cannot find those punishments in Islamic law, but because they were not being applied in line with the law. And so that became a major part of the book, the debates. And naturally, when you challenge that in a time when everybody was passionate and emotional, every Muslim was happy that he had Sharia, you're going to have debates with scholars. Scholars came after me, Muslims came after me. I was almost declared an apostate, and I kept debating. And now, all the things I was saying at that time have turned out to be true. That's the North is paying the price. And now in September, when I write my PhD, I'm doing a PhD in law, and I'm actually writing on the codification of Muslim family law as an instrument of social reform. And I'm using this Muslim code as a case study, and then comparing with the reforms in Morocco. So it's a subject that I've been engaged with and passionate about for decades, and it's something that I'm likely to remain engaged with for the rest of my life.
All of this good work you've done, all of this advocacy ties around the economy of the nascent country we are in. And it ties around the economic ability, the social mobility, I mean, all of that conversation. The state of the Nigerian economy, I wouldn't forgive myself if I don't ask you about that. We're in a quagmire, we're deep in the dirt now as we speak. It looks as though with the state of the currency, the Naira, it has just been a gift that keeps giving since 1986 January. It's just been a slippery slope. What can we do?
Okay, so let me give you an idea of when we look at numbers, how bad things are. If you look at the World Bank development indicators, in 1980, on a PPP basis, our per capita GDP was, I believe, $2,229. In 2014, it had risen to $3,099, a 50% rise. In 2019, our GDP per capita on a PPP basis was down to 2,180. No, it was 2,180 in 1980, 2,229 in 2019. Now, at this rate, by 2023, on a per capita basis, PPP, we will be back where we were in 1980. We have been set back 40 years. I mean, and you look at the fall. I mean, between 2014 and 2019, all the gains made in 35 years between 1980 and 2014 were wiped out. This is what tells you where we are, and these are numbers that are there. When we talk about huge devaluations or high rates of inflation and low rates of GDP growth and excessive rates of population growth, all of these factors come into that number, because the rate of growth, if your population is growing faster than your GDP, your per capita income goes down anyway, even if nothing happened to inflation rates and exchange rates. Now, when you compound that with high rates of inflation and high rates of devaluation, then on a dollar basis, the rate of collapse is huge. And that's what we've had in the last 5 years. We've had growth that has been outstripped by population growth. You've had inflation that's in the upper double digits, and you've had massive devaluation of the currency. And that has wiped out all the work that was done in the 35 years prior to 2015. To my mind, we had decisions that should have been taken in 2015, 2016. They should have been taken actually much earlier. Remember, in 2011, we had this big debate over the removal of fuel subsidy. That has been a major problem. I have been screaming about this for over a decade. It's unsustainable. Even if this was all subsidy, you were subsidizing consumption. Totally, I have never understood why we believe that for the poor people of this country, giving them cheap petrol is more important than giving them education or giving them healthcare, because that's what it is. I mean, these things are about choice. You're taking money, out of education, taking money out of healthcare, taking money out of infrastructure, and putting it in subsidizing the importation of petroleum products that will make profits and create jobs in England and France, who were the major countries exporting petroleum products to us, an oil-producing country, by the way, which cannot fix its own refineries. I believe that we had a great opportunity when we had a change in government to put this economy on reset. And I think most of my problems with politicians came from my saying out that we were not taking those steps and we were placing the country on the path to bankruptcy. So what happened? We spent, before COVID, before 2020, we spent 4 or 5 years paying out trillions as petroleum subsidy at a time when oil price was low and government revenue was low. Now, when you pay out those trillions, what happens? You've still got to pay salaries, you've still got to do your infrastructure, you've still got to spend money. And then you push in your debt limit. So you keep borrowing and you get to a point where 87% of your revenue, according to the World Bank, is being used to service debt, and it's still not enough. And then you put pressure on the central bank to print the money for you, to monetize the deficit, because the central bank cannot allow the government to collapse. But the reason the central bank has to fill the hole is because the government did not take the necessary but difficult political decision not to create that hole in the first place. But when the central bank monetizes the deficit, then you exert pressure on the exchange rate and on the rate of inflation. And then the decisions become even more impossible, because whereas you could have removed subsidy in 2015 and maybe be paying, 190 naira per litre? If you remove the subsidy today at current exchange rates, you may need to buy petrol at 380 or 400 naira per litre. So it looks even more impossible than in 2015, but it has been made more impossible because when we should have taken the decision, we did not. And I think for me, this is why I'm not too sympathetic to the administration. I think the problems that we have were foreseen, they were foreseeable. Every economist would have told you that this is where we're going to end up on exchange rates. This is where we're going to end up with inflation. This is where we're going to end up with the fiscal position of government. You cannot continue digging a hole. If you find yourself in a hole, you stop digging. But we found ourselves in a hole in 2015 and continued digging ourselves into a deeper hole. I think, for me, this was the source of my problems, saying it. Unfortunately, I've always said I am not a problem. You can take me out, you can kill me, you can jail me, you can say anything about me. It will not change the numbers. It will not change the poverty levels. It will not change inflation. It will not change exchange rate. At the end of the day, you've got to implement the right policy. I don't care what you do to me, but just do the right thing. So we are in a difficult position, and to be honest, we are today in an economic mess that is far, far worse than we were in 2015. I will say that part of the problem is that you've got a shortage of economists in government. When you sit in the Federal Executive Council, you need some economists in the room. In 2015, when the cabinet was appointed, there were 36 ministers. Most of them were just lawyers. I mean, I have nothing against lawyers, but you have an economic crisis. But ask yourself, how many economists were in that government? I can't think of one. So I think that we need debt relief. I think we need to do the belt tightening. And I think we need to send out clear signals that we've got to have a strong fiscal position. I really feel sorry for the governor of Central Bank. I feel sorry for the Minister of Finance. I don't know. I don't know how I would cope if I was there at this point in time.
Very, very exciting insight you shared there. But looking back at your life 60 years, down the line, let's just take a panoramic view. You've transcended all. You've gone from being a corporate boardroom titan to being a traditional religious leader, an emir, and you've seen it all. To being an activist, an advocate. I mean, what would you say about your life in the next 60 years? If you have a crystal ball and you want to look at the future, what would be those things you'd like to do?
So, my plan, I want to strengthen, for example, my fluency in French. I want to do my PhD in Islamic law. By strengthening French, Arabic, English, I move into being an African statesman. Because with those languages, you're all over Africa, apart from the Portuguese-speaking countries. With the PhD and with the publications I'm making, I'm now working on a book on my central bank years. You begin to get into an academic life and continue to build a public intellectual life, continue as a public intellectual. The reason we celebrate being 60 is that I can see, I know many of my mates and friends who passed on before this age. It could have been me. So you have that time, you make the best of the time. And I thank God that at 60, my children and everybody can turn around and say, well, this is someone who was a chief risk officer, who was a CEO, who was governor of central bank, who was emir, who was Khaleefa Tijani. And that's, I imagine that's more than many people achieve in many lifetimes. And the only way you can do that is by not wasting your time thinking about unimportant things like what may have happened in the past, or who likes me or who does not like me, and just focusing on who you want to be and how you can make the best of yourself. Thank
you so much. I mean, 60 years is about you running your race, and in the end, it's about running your race and doing it your own way. Thank you so much, Your Highness. Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.